So this is one of the concepts when I read StrengthsFinder many years ago. I don't remember when exactly, but it's one of the concepts that I find really interesting because the book actually said you have both the strengths and weaknesses. Many people, since we are children, we are being taught that we should also focus a lot on improving our weaknesses. But the book actually said that instead of doing that, actually you should put more focus on your strengths and try to manage your weaknesses so that they don't get in the way, like what you said. So tell us more about this concept of StrengthsFinder. So for people who haven't heard about it, right? Why is it so important to focus a lot more on your strengths versus your weaknesses?
I'm going to take us through Dr. Donald Clifton, the founder of StrengthsFinder, and he had many partners around the world. Dr. Donald Clifton, over the course of a few decades, 30 years, he was drawn to study human excellence. He wanted to understand what was it about really successful people. He picked many different walks of life, many different careers, and he wanted to know why is it that some people could really excel and not just excel once or twice, but sustain excellence, and why many more people seem to just live in mediocrity in that space. Through his journey, what he discovered is that the people who really were in touch, they had high self-awareness, they knew who they were, and they knew who they were not, meaning they knew their strengths and they knew their non-strengths. And they were comfortable with both without judgment, but they put more effort into being the best that they could according to their strengths. So what he called this was the strengths-based approach to development, simply a shift in time. Most of us who were taught the conventional approach to human development were taught to put more time into our areas of weakness or inadequacy. His question was, well, what if we just flipped it? What if we put more time into our strengths? And the two places, Henry, where he saw this very natural, again and again practiced, were athletics and in performing arts. So when a player would come into either of those scenes, the instructor or coach would determine their skill set and almost without a doubt, without fail, position them to do what they do best. So as he observed this, his question became, and I'll tell you one of his famous interviews that occurred. It was in 1984, and it was the table tennis team picked to win the gold medal in the Olympics in Los Angeles. The team from China had an athlete that was renowned, an amazing athlete, but he was renowned for not having a good backhand. He could not hit a good backhand. So any of us who play table tennis or tennis know without a backhand, you have a serious deficiency. Very likely you won't be successful. So an interview was conducted that Dr. Clifton was a part of where they asked the coach, so what is it that you do with your very best player who doesn't play well from his backhand? He said, that's easy. We spend 8 hours a day focusing on his forehand to make it the most lethal, very best in the world, and we ignore the backhand altogether. And what Dr. Clifton surmised from this was we can become so far advanced in our strengths that they can essentially eclipse the areas of weakness. Conversely, and this is an interesting statistic, based on his research, and I don't know that this is one of his more cemented facts. This is one I think that was more anecdotal, but I think you'll understand the point. He said that for every one strength a person has, they have 1,000 weaknesses. So one strength over 1,000 weaknesses. And so his comment was the most responsible thing a human can do, either personally for their own development or the development of others, is play to a person's strengths. In their entire lifetime, they could never solve their weaknesses. This is where we begin the journey with an organization or with a family or with an agency, a nonprofit, to say, you only have so much time to develop people. That's the great equalizer. You only have so much time. You may find that you will not only get better results focusing on their strengths, but then you'll have qualitative benefits, happier people, people that want to be better team members, people that treat customers better. So this is some of the beginning space of where we build on this concept.
Wow, thanks for sharing this story. I haven't heard about this China Olympics athlete that had to train to focus more a lot on his strengths, which is the forehand, and can win the championship without the backhand, which is some people think, how could that be?
1984. It was 1984. The reference is a book titled Soar with Your Strengths. So the book Soar with Your Strengths is where this story is immortalized.
Wow. Okay. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Which brings me to the next discussion, right? Because again, since we are children, we are being taught focus a lot more to improve your weaknesses. I mean, the idea is not so much to say that we should improve a lot on so many different areas, but it's to probably make us all rounder. So someone who can do many of the things. This is probably the reasons why many people, if you ask, what are your strengths? Not everyone can easily say, just like you just now, right? I'm a maximizer. Not everyone could actually easily say that. But if you ask them about weaknesses, people can easily throw so many things. I'm bad at this, I'm bad at that. But to focus on the strengths, maybe some people need to find some time to actually summarize. Why do you think this is a big problem? What could people do to actually change that?
Well, since you brought up the family, I'll mention this. Children who are taught to focus more on their strengths than on their weaknesses, we've seen three major advances. So first of all, they can increase their confidence. When a child has high confidence, it permeates into their ability to make friends, their performance in their school, their ability to face difficulty, which all of us will face some difficulty in life. So it impacts resilience. Number two, we watch children increase in creativity. So their ability to approach complex problems and see alternatives instead of closed doors, they find open doors. With that creativity, it expands learning. So it opens up opportunity for increased learning and increased space for them to really develop a very full and healthy brain. Third, we see competence. When we study brain science, when we lean into what is called the old brain, our limbic system, this is the part of our brain that's reactive. So it's fight, flight, or freeze, as compared to our new brain, the prefrontal cortex, where this is where we have wisdom and logic and a depth of knowledge. It's our sage brain, our deepest intelligence. Well, in a space where a child feels confident and they're creative, then their competence goes up. They can learn more. They can experience more. They're not capped by fear. They're not capped by insecurity and doubt. Dr. Clifton was very passionate, even more so than Gallup's work in the business world, and they do extensive work with very large companies around the world. He was very interested in parenting and education, because if a child at a young age could learn to build on their strengths, his reasoning is that person into their career, into their family, into their future would be much more successful. And this is interesting, much happier in life, much more fulfilled, higher well-being. And so I think that this is important. And I'll give you two primary statistics when we advance the children to their career years. Number one is this. Let's say that you and I were working together, Henry, and let's say that I was your manager. If I spent more time talking to you about your strengths and your weaknesses, you are 6 times more likely to be engaged on your job. So this means all that would connect to your productivity, your accuracy, your punctuality, your friendliness with our customers, with our team members, 6 times more likely. And because you're engaged, you're 3 times more likely to report having excellent quality of life. And this is, Henry, outside of work. This is your loved ones, places where you volunteer, and your ability to get good rest, and your health and fitness. And so this is where we believe at 34 Strong, I believe this personally with the work we do with families, that this approach can really not only positively affect positive change in workplaces, but it can affect positive change in a person's life. It can change their life because of how deep it will impact their psychology and eventually their physiology associated.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Just to summarize, so you mentioned if we focus on strengths since we are young, there are 3 things that probably could increase because of that. So you have increased confidence, you have increased creativity, and ultimately increase in competence. And those will lead you to a happier and fulfilled life. So I think that's probably a message for all the listeners, right? So if you haven't known for the longest time your strengths, try to find some of those strengths. Maybe you can go through Strengths Finder or buy the book. There's a free test that you can go through online. You can probably start categorizing what are some of your strengths and start to build from there, because the impact is so massive.